welcome to the Philosophy. I'm your host, Eric Bell, and my first guest tonight is Darryl W. Perry, who is a regular contributor of several weekly and monthly newspapers. He's the host of many of daily newscasts, the FPP Radio News, the podcast Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, and weekly news podcast FPP Freedom Minutes, and is a regular co-host on Free Talk Live. He is a co-founder and co-chair of the New Hampshire Liberty Party, and he was on the national committee of the Boston Tea Party from 2008 to 2012, and he is the longest-serving member, and he was twice elected chair, and he's currently running for the Libertarian Party's nomination. Go ahead and welcome to the show. Hi, Darryl. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. Doing good. Thanks
for
having me on, Eric.
My pleasure, my friend. So, as I mentioned last week, of course, there was after when Rand Paul had announced, and there was this news article going around that he was the first presidential candidate to accept Bitcoin, which I reported that was very inaccurate. For one thing, my guest last week, Vermin Supreme, has been accepting that for the last few weeks now, and you've been on the record since 2013 that was the only that Bitcoin and Litecoin and other cryptocurrencies and precious metals were the only thing you were accepting. You weren't accepting any Federal Reserve notes.
That's correct. And I've tried correcting a few journalists on this. I actually got into sort of a Twitter war with somebody that writes for some website called rare.us, and they're also a contributor to the Libertarian Republic, which is basically a Republican sort of website that claims to have some libertarian ideologies. And this guy just would not admit that he made a mistake. He was like, well, there's not really much of a process in the Libertarian Party, and they don't have primaries. And, besides, Gary Johnson's going to be their nominee, and, Rand Paul's the first real candidate. I was like, wow. Real candidate. That's what he was saying about, Libertarian Party doesn't really have a process, but they do have a process. And the process, it's not as public as the Republican and Democratic Party process, but the Libertarian Party does have a process, and that process is delegates are selected from the various states, and they're not selected based on, the winners of primaries. They're selected based on who wants to go to the National Convention, who can afford to go to the National Convention, because, we're talking about people that they're not getting their convention subsidized by federal tax dollars. They're not getting their convention subsidized by giant corporations that are paying for the delegates to show up. So you have to have people that, have a little bit of expendable cash to be able to go down to Orlando for the people that they cast the votes to determine the nominee. And there actually are a handful of states where there will be a Libertarian Party presidential primaries. Now, these primaries are not binding, but they will happen. And it's going to be interesting to see that they are not binding.
Okay. And
Missouri has a Libertarian Party presidential primary because the Libertarians are ballot qualified there, and Missouri gives every party that's ballot qualified a primary. The filing fee is $1,000, or you can collect a number of signatures, or you can file an indigent waiver and get on the primary by just filing this "I don't have the $1,000 to give you" piece of paper. North Carolina will have a Libertarian Party presidential primary. The way candidates get on in North Carolina is the chair of the party tells the Secretary of State, these are the people that are running, and the Secretary of State puts them on the ballot. California does something similar. I believe Nebraska has a very similar process. Delaware, the Libertarians are entitled to a primary, but it is so difficult to get on the ballot that nobody will probably be able to get on the ballot. Arizona, there's a primary, but the legislature just made it more difficult for minor party candidates to get on their primary ballots. So I don't know if anybody as a Libertarian or Green Party member will get on the ballot for either of those presidential preference primaries. And Idaho also will have one, but again, Idaho, it's fairly difficult for, the candidate to actually wind up getting on the ballot. But there will be a handful of primaries with Libertarians on the primary ballot. Again, not binding, but they are going to happen. So, to say that there's not a process, this guy obviously had no clue what he was talking about and just didn't want to admit that he made a mistake. And I actually sent out an email blast to several hundred members of the media. I don't think anybody picked it up other than Independent Political Report. But, anytime we can try to correct mistruths in the media, it should be done. Sadly, most people in the media don't want to admit that they made a mistake.
Okay. And was this, of course, for Rare USA and the Libertarian Republic that were saying this is not, that you're not a real candidate or whatever? Who specifically said that? Was it just someone that's
I believe the guy's name is Nick Morphus. At least that's the Twitter name that he uses.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, of course, name names. And I guess I'd like to get a little bit into the reasoning why you're, of course, not accepting Federal Reserve notes and just Bitcoin and other precious metals. Is that because, well, you, of course, you just don't think it's the FEC's business, or is it, or do you want to just bring more awareness to Bitcoin and Litecoin and all this stuff, or is it a combination of both?
I would say it's a combination of both. And in 2013, when I started taking Bitcoin for the campaign, I sent a letter to the FEC saying that I intend this to be the first, last, and only correspondence that I send to you. I do not plan on filing any of the forms that you claim candidates need to file. I don't believe you have any authority. I can be transparent without you. And to further show how serious I am about not wanting to abide by your rules and regulations, I'm not going to accept the money that you regulate. And, of course, after that, I believe it was sometime late last year, might have been last summer, is when the FEC came out with the regulation saying, candidates can take Bitcoin, but it has to be limited at $100. They have to this on one hand like a cash donation, but on the other hand it's an in-kind contribution. You can't use the Bitcoin to actually buy anything. You have to convert the Bitcoin to cash before you can do anything with it. And what I'm doing, I'm not collecting anybody's information. I've got a Bitcoin QR code on my website, darrellwperry.com/donate. Send Bitcoin. You can now send, there's about 24 cryptocurrencies that you can send. There's a company called Shapeshift.io that they launched a tool a couple of weeks ago that allows someone to, click a little button, list which one of these altcoins that they want to send. So you can send Dogecoin, Litecoin, Potcoin, I think Darkcoin, BitShares. And there's, there's 24 total on the list the last time I checked. Select which one of those you want to send, how much the amount in Bitcoin is, and then it pops you up the QR code for whatever coin you want to send. And then Shapeshift will convert that. They do all of the converting on their end, convert that to Bitcoin. So I would receive Bitcoin. You could send whichever one of the 24 currencies you wanted to. And I'm not keeping any records of anything other than how much is received and how much I spent.
Nice. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the developments. That essentially, have you had any threat of any legal trouble with that, or?
I have not had any correspondence with the FEC or any of their attorneys other than the one letter that I have sent them. And if you actually go to their website and search for my name, you will see they have scanned in that letter that I sent them, and they do have me listed as a presidential candidate, but they don't have me listed under the ones that have filed whatever paperwork they want people to file. But if you go to the FEC website, there's the way where you can search for people. Search for Darryl W. Perry. The letter that I sent them will be there.
Okay. All right. Looks like we have a caller online. Oh, nope, he just dropped as soon as I just mentioned that. Oh well. So what is libertarianism in your words? If you were to, of course, get the nomination, you get as much, and of course you get as little mainstream coverage as you do. Whether it's on CNN, Fox News, and they ask you, what is libertarianism? What would you say to them, to the rest of to the whole unfree world? But
and I can define libertarianism in one sentence. Libertarianism is the idea that you have every right in the world, and everyone has the same rights that you do. The only thing you don't have a right to do is cause unjust harm to any other person. That is libertarianism. That you have the right to do as you wish, as long as you don't cause harm to any other person. And everyone has that right. No one has more rights. No one has fewer rights. You can't create a group that has more rights than the individual. And that's